There is a person in your life who never seems to chase anyone. They don't over-explain themselves. They don't apologize for who they are. They don't flood your inbox or volunteer their time to people who don't appreciate it. And somehow, without trying, without performing, without any visible effort, people want to be around them. People listen when they speak. People value their time. People treat them differently than they treat everyone else. You probably assumed this person was just lucky, or naturally charismatic, or born with some social quality you weren't given. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that this person consciously or not understands something about human psychology that most people were never taught. Something that sounds almost cruel when you say it plainly, but is so consistently true that ignoring it quietly costs most people everything. The thing is this: human beings do not value what is freely and easily available. We are wired, at a deep psychological level, to assign worth based on scarcity, on effort, on what something costs us to obtain. And this applies not just to objects or opportunities, it applies to people, to your time, to your attention, to your presence, to you. Today we are going to decode the dark psychology of value, why some people are treated as rare and worth protecting, while others are taken for granted no matter how much they give. And more importantly, what actually changes that dynamic. Subscribe before we go further. This is one of the most practically important things this channel has covered. Let's get into it. Part 1. Why free things get ignored in the 1970s. Psychologists ran a series of experiments on what they called the scarcity principle. When people were shown identical objects, cookies for example, and told that one group had 10 available while another group had only 2, they consistently rated the scarce cookies as more desirable, more valuable, better tasting. The cookies were identical. Nothing about them had changed. Only the perceived availability had changed. And that was enough. This is not a quirk. This is a deeply embedded feature of human cognition. Our brains evolved in an environment where scarcity was a reliable signal of value. If something was hard to find, it was probably worth having. If something was everywhere, it probably wasn't special. The brain learned this rule and applied it automatically, below conscious reasoning. And here is where it becomes uncomfortable. The same rule applies to people. When you are always available, when you answer every message immediately, when you say yes to every request, when you show up for people who haven't shown up for you, when you give your time and attention freely, regardless of whether it's valued, you are, in the language of your nervous system and theirs, signaling abundance. And abundance, psychologically, does not get treated as precious. This is not a cynical observation. It is a neutral one. The people who take you for granted are not necessarily bad people. Their brains are simply doing what brains do with freely available resources. They stop paying attention to them. Hit that like button right now if you've ever given someone everything, and watch them value it less than someone who gave them almost nothing. Because what comes next explains exactly why that happens. Part 2. The psychology of perceived value. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called effort justification. When people work hard to obtain something, they value it more, not because the thing itself is objectively better, but because the effort they invested creates a psychological need to justify that investment. The mind reasons backwards. I worked hard for this, therefore it must be worth it. This is why exclusive things feel more valuable. Why earning something feels different from being given it. Why the relationship you had to work a little for feels more significant than the one that came easily. Not because the earned version is actually better, but because the effort changed how your mind processes it. Now apply this to yourself. If your time requires no effort to access, if anyone can have your attention, your energy, your presence simply by asking, then no one has to justify an investment to be around you. And without that investment, the psychological mechanisms that generate value, care, and respect simply don't activate the same way. The people who are treated as high value are not always the most talented, the most beautiful, or the most accomplished. They are the people whose time and attention requires something to access. Not necessarily money, not necessarily grand gestures, but something. Some form of investment, of earned access, of reciprocal effort that signals to the other person's brain that what they are receiving is not freely available to everyone. Part 3. What making yourself expensive actually means here is where most people misunderstand this concept. And I want to be precise, because the misunderstanding leads people somewhere genuinely harmful. Making yourself expensive does not mean being cold. It does not mean being unavailable for the people who matter to you. It does not mean manufacturing fake scarcity, or playing games with people's emotions, or withholding yourself to manipulate. All of those things are strategies of insecurity dressed up as confidence. And they tend to produce shallow relationships and a reputation for being difficult. What making yourself expensive actually means is this: your time, your energy, and your attention are finite. They are genuinely precious. And the way you treat them, whether you give them freely to anyone who asks, or whether you give them with discernment to people and situations that deserve them, communicates something to every person in your life about how you expect to be treated. When you say yes to everything, you are not being generous. You are being boundaryless. And boundarylessness, psychologically, reads not as abundance of love, but as absence of self. When people sense that you have no real limits on your availability, that you will always be there, regardless of how they treat you, they do not feel grateful. They feel, often unconsciously, that they cannot lose you. And what cannot be lost is not treated as precious. Subscribe right now if this is describing a dynamic you've been living in without knowing why, because the next part is where it actually changes. Part 4. The 4 things that create genuine value there are 4 specific behaviors that psychologically elevate how others perceive and treat you. None of them require you to become someone you're not. All of them require you to become more honestly yourself. The first is selective presence. The people who are treated as valuable are not always the people who show up for everything. They are the people whose presence means something, because it is not guaranteed. When you are present, you are fully present, engaged, interested, genuinely there, but you are not present for everything and everyone at all times, regardless of whether your presence is valued or reciprocated. This is not about being difficult. It is about being real. Your energy is finite. Your attention is finite. The people who receive it fully, who get the version of you that is actually there, actually engaged, experience something that people who get the distracted, stretched thin, giving to everyone version do not. And that difference in quality of presence is something people feel, even when they cannot articulate it. The second is comfort with saying no. Nothing communicates value more clearly, more immediately, and more reliably than the ability to say no without excessive explanation or apology. Not a hostile no. Not a cold no. A clear, confident, undefensive no that carries with it the implicit message, I make choices about where my energy goes, and this is not where it's going right now. Most people cannot do this. Most people say yes when they mean no. then feel resentful, then give at a diminished and begrudging level that serves no one. The ability to say a clean no is not cruelty. It is the thing that makes your yes actually mean something. The third is having something to return to. People who are treated as high value almost always have this in common. Their life is not waiting for other people to fill it. They have work that matters to them. They have interests they pursue seriously. They have an inner world that is rich enough that solitude is not something they fear or flee from. This produces something in their energy that is almost impossible to fake. The quality of someone who does not need you to complete them. And that quality, genuine self-sufficiency, genuine inner richness, is among the most attractive things one human being can communicate to another, not because it is a strategy, because it is real. And realness in a world full of performance is genuinely rare. The fourth is consistency between words and actions. The final thing that creates psychological value is the simplest and the hardest. When you say something, you mean it. When you commit to something, you do it. When you express what you want or need, your behavior reflects it. The alignment between what you say and what you do is the foundation of genuine respect, not the admiration at a distance that fame produces, but the deep, durable respect that comes from knowing someone is exactly who they appear to be. This consistency is rare enough that when people encounter it, it registers as something different, something worth holding on to, something that should not be taken for granted. And that feeling that this person means what they say and does what they means is the psychological foundation of being treated as genuinely valuable. Part 5. The paradox at the center of all of this here is the strange truth at the heart of everything we've covered today. The people who are most desperately seeking to be valued, who give the most, who are most available, who try the hardest to be needed, are almost always the least valued. And the people who are most settled in themselves, who give from fullness rather than need, who are genuinely fine whether or not they are chosen, tend to be the most valued. This feels unfair. It can feel like the universe is rewarding selfishness and punishing generosity. But that is not what is happening. What is happening is simpler and more neutral than that. Desperation is a signal, not of love, not of worthiness, not of value, but of need. And when people sense that your giving comes from a need to be needed, from a fear of being unwanted, from an attempt to purchase approval through availability, it does not produce gratitude. It produces the particular discomfort of receiving something you didn't ask for from someone who needs you to receive it. Generosity from fullness looks completely different. When someone who has enough, who is enough, chooses to give their time, their attention, their energy to you, it lands differently. It feels like a gift rather than a burden. It feels like a choice rather than a plea. And it produces, in the person receiving it, exactly the response that the desperate giving was trying and failing to produce. Genuine appreciation, genuine care, genuine respect. The goal is not to become someone who gives less. The goal is to become someone who gives from a place so settled, so genuinely whole, that what you give carries the weight of real choice behind it. Closing you are not too much. You are not asking for too much. You are not the problem. But if you have been giving freely and being taken for granted, if you have been available to everyone and valued by almost no one, if you have been trying to earn your worth through generosity and finding that it doesn't work, then what needs to change is not how much you give. It is where you give from. The dark psychology of value is not really dark at all. It is simply the truth that value is perceived, not inherent. And the perception of value is shaped not by how much you offer, but by how clearly you demonstrate that what you offer is not available to everyone, always, for free. Your time is finite. Your attention is a gift. Your presence, fully given, is one of the rarest things one human being can offer another. Treat it that way, not to manipulate, not to play games, but because it is true. And because when you treat your own time and energy as precious, the people around you will begin to treat it that way too. Hit that like button if this gave you something worth thinking about today. Drop in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you gave everything and got nothing back? Drop a yes below. I read every single comment. And subscribe before you go. Next week, we go deeper into the psychology of how people treat you and what actually changes it. You do not want to miss it. Until then, stop being free. Start being expensive.